About the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. Lecture. The scheme for studying the structure of the Absolute shows, among other things, as if windows, doors, and gates, which are entrances to other worlds. Also, on this scheme, one can see that the souls are conceived by the Creator in paradise, though they cannot be called human souls yet, but rather a kind of embryos, which will be embodied first in vegetal and animal bodies. This truth is reflected in the biblical story about Eden. Some souls, incarnating and evolving in the world of matter, thanks to the freedom of will that they were given, for the purpose of better development of the evolutionary process, preserve their purity from the filth of negative emotions. Others get attached to material objects, including their own bodies. These attachments give rise to egocentrism and hostility towards other creatures, considering them rivals with whom one has to compete for possession of food, luxury, and objects of sexual lust. Some people even assume the right to kill animals for the sake of satisfaction of their gluttony. Such a choice between good and evil can be represented schematically as a fork, like that on a branch of a tree. The choice of the way of evil is what the Bible calls the fall of man. God continues to offer each soul an opportunity to make a choice in ethically important situations, to act for the sake of oneself at the detriment of others, or to sacrifice something of oneself for the sake of others. That is, to do evil or good. In this way, each soul draws a graph of its development. Many branchings where one always has to choose only one direction. It is from this picture that the image of a tree originates. As a result of moving along these trajectories of choice, some souls come to the abode of the Creator, others to the hell, which they have chosen. There is another interpretation of the story about the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It is also correct and supplements the first one. The error of people consisted in forgetting that God controls everything that enters our lives, and in that respect, good and evil that come to us are equal, for they both are manifestations of the pedagogical measures of our loving and wise parent. Therefore, we should regard everything as a blessing coming from him. So, when evil comes to us, we should try to see the intention of God behind it, and having realized it, having discovered its reason in ourselves, we have to strive to improve. One can react in a wrong way by trying, for example, to revenge oneself upon the offender, having forgotten about the master of our destinies, God. Or sometimes in some originally primitive or degraded religious movements, in order to explain the roots of evil, people create a rival to God who is almost equal to him. They call him Satan, Lucifer, and by other names. Such primitive religious conceptions can appear when people reduce boundless, universal God to a flying old man sitting on a cloud. Correct understanding in the situations of encounters with evil is extremely important. There is a mechanism of self-transformation that consists in the attunement of the consciousness to the state of a certain object. If we attune to the beauty of the rising sun in the quiet, tender morning, or to the singing of morning birds, then we fill ourselves with subtlety and harmony of nature. If we seek the Creator and try to attune to Him, we approach Him, and He helps us in this. If we fix our indriyas of the consciousness at some embodied or unembodied filth, we automatically attune to its hellish state and become similar to it by our emotional status. And if we leave the body before we have improved, then we will go to hell along with it. This is why Jesus Christ taught not to revenge oneself, not to damn the offenders, but to forgive them sincerely and feel compassion for them, and not to demand back what we were bereft of. It is better to give to the robber even more than what he wants to take from us, so as not to exit from the state of love. I was deceived and betrayed many times. I was even killed by such human filth and was painfully dying for many months, but I remained a Christian. I neither revenged myself, nor did I attune to them. I continued to seek the union with God, and I won. Also, I have helped many others in this, and will help more. You can do the same, and win as well. Stages of the Spiritual Path. Lecture. A person who starts walking confidently the religious path can go through the following 7 stages of it. 1. Acquiring the correct understanding of our highest goal and the ways of its attainment. 2. Initial ethic self-correction in accordance with the intention of God through elimination of ethic imperfections, as well as through the development of required qualities, of which love is the principal one. 3. Refinement of oneself as a consciousness in order to get into the highest planes, eons or lokas, of the multidimensional space, of which the abode of the primordial universal consciousness, God the Father, the Creator, is the subtlest. 4. Quantitative development of the refined consciousness. 5. Mastering the methods of merging with God. 6. Consolidation of mergence with God. 7. Acquiring divine powers and providing help to other incarnate beings from the state of the Holy Spirit. For the majority of the readers, deceived by the atheistic and sectarian propaganda, this may sound surprising and even implausible, but this is exactly what God has been teaching people throughout the entire history of mankind, through prophets or himself, appearing before people in human bodies of messiahs, avatars, and Christs. All these words mean the same in different languages. The meaning of our lives consists in the development of ourselves as consciousnesses, first within our temporary abodes, our bodies, and then beyond them in the boundless multidimensional universe. This development has 2 major directions, qualitative and quantitative. The former consists of the following 3 components: intellectual and ethic perfection and refinement of the consciousness. The quantitative aspect implies a direct increase of the amount of the energy of the individual consciousness, which subsequently using special meditative techniques, infuses into the ocean of the universal consciousness, who may be called differently in different languages: the Creator, God the Father, Jehovah, Allah, Tao, Ishvara, primordial consciousness, Adi-Buddha, etc. The universe is multidimensional. This is not just a mathematical reasoning, but reality, which can be experienced by man. Spatial dimensions have been known to religious practitioners from time immemorial. They were called eons in Greek and lokas in Sanskrit. In Agni Yoga, the term layers was used to refer to them. The highest, primary spatial dimension is the abode of the primordial universal consciousness, which, as it was described in the Bhagavad Gita, creates the manifested world by condensing diffused cosmic energy, proto-prakriti, to the material state. These islets of solid matter get inhabited by small parts of another kind of previously diffused energy, proto-purusha, which will have to evolve up to the divine state by means of multiple incarnations into organic bodies, and then to infuse themselves into the primordial consciousness, thus enriching it with themselves. This process of soul development starts with initial forming of lumps of energy on crystalline lattices. Then follow incarnations into vegetable, animal, and finally into human bodies. The task of every one of us, at the final stage of the development of the soul, is to make efforts on bringing ourselves as soon as possible to the divinity and to merge with the Creator. Creation of the world is not a phenomenon of the all-universal scale. Astronomers periodically observe birth of new stars and planets. Our star systems get destroyed. This constitutes their end of the world. All souls who have not attained divinity by that moment get disintegrated down to the proto-purusha state. The material component of the islets of matter and material bodies of people, animals, plants turn into proto-prakriti and become thus the construction material for new worlds. Proto-prakriti and proto-purusha are collectively called akasha. In some publication, this word is sometimes translated as ether, which is absolutely inadequate. We have described already the multidimensional structure of the universe. Here, I can only say that this phenomenon can be likened to radio waves of different frequencies that coexist within the same volume of space, with little or no interaction with one another. And all of them are in the multidimensional depth, beneath the material world, including the matter of our bodies. We are being unable to perceive them under regular conditions. In the same manner, spirits that inhabit coarser eons cannot see what is going on in deeper, subtler eons, although they are supervised from there. One can move into subtler eons only in the incarnate state by making spiritual efforts. The transformation, transmutation of the energy of the consciousness can take place only in a human body, a specialized transmutation factory, capable of assimilating the energy derived from ordinary food and using it, among other purposes, for growth of the lump of the energy of the consciousness. From this, it becomes clear that neither someone's prayers nor solicitations have the power to resettle souls from hell eons to those of paradise. The legend about Jesus Christ releasing sinners from hell contains distorted information. He was not saving non-embodied sinners, but embodied ones, by giving them the teachings of God. By following these teachings, they could free themselves from suffering through the refinement of the consciousness, through love-tenderness, forgiveness, compassion, elimination of anger, and all kinds of rudeness, as well as egocentrism. In esoteric literature, one may encounter inadequate usage of the term fourth dimension. This is the case even with the Book of Jesus, in which Jesus used this term when talking to Ben Cullen in his own language, i.e., using the words which his interlocutor uses and whose meaning he knows. In this book, the term fourth dimension was used even in two inadequate interpretations, as the abode of God the Father and as the aggregate of non-material eons. But in reality, by the logic of the term fourth dimension itself, it should denote the material world, existence of which is determined not by three, but by four dimensions: length, width, height, and time. Let us continue talking about the universal evolution. The process of settlement of every new islet of the creation begins with the spirits who achieved the state of the Holy Spirit, Brahman, in the course of their evolution on other islets. They become constructors and supervisors of the evolution of life on the newly created planets. The whole space inside and around our planet is also pervaded with their huge consciousnesses, which are called collectively the Holy Spirit or Brahman. In other words, as it must already be clear, the Holy Spirit is not at all a radiation of God the Father, or of God the Father and of God the Son. No, the Holy Spirit is living divine consciousnesses, subtle and loving, who teach us and are constantly present inside and outside our bodies. They are extremely glad when we lovingly direct our attention towards them, willing to accept their help in order to get closer to them, to their state. The same is true for the consciousness of the Creator. It is even deeper in the multidimensional space and incomparably larger. It is boundless. The consciousness of the Creator, as the consciousness of the Holy Spirit, is present inside, in the multidimensional depth, beneath every cell of our bodies. The distance between us and it is not greater than the thickness of finest paper, as Jesus Christ perfectly formulated. And one should not fly anywhere or travel too far in search of God. He is present right here and now inside us, but in another eon. And the only thing separating us from Him is our coarseness, which is a consequence of our religious ignorance and lack of the development of the consciousness. We have to find God inside, in the depth of our own spiritual hearts. This well-known postulate is not just a nice metaphor, but a quite concrete instruction on where we have to direct our efforts. Apart from the abode of the Creator, there exist many other eons that differ by the level of coarseness subtlety. The subtlest of them are called paradisiacal. The coarsest ones are called hellish. If we want to save ourselves from going to hell after the death of the body, then we have to learn to live steadfastly in the light, pure, and subtle state of the consciousness, while we are still embodied. Since upon parting with the physical body, we will live in the state which became habitual for us during our life in the body. And according to this, we will find ourselves in the eon inhabited by beings similar to us, either evil, furious, irritated, anxious, and deceitful, or affectionate, calm, tenderly loving, and caring. How can we fall in love with God? Lecture. Our love for God must guide us not towards attainment of paradise, but towards reaching even greater spiritual heights, towards mergence with the Creator in His highest eon. This is what He expects us to accomplish, because this constitutes His evolution, His very life. And if we love Him, we have to do this for His sake, not for our sake. It is good to fall in love with Him to such a degree that we long for Him, being unable to find any peace without Him. Being in love with God must become similar to being passionately in love with another person. It implies longing for the real mergence, the mergence of consciousnesses, just like human souls, flaming with love for each other, merge. In order to fall in love with God like this, one has to know about Him as much as possible, and He can be cognized in reality, not only intellectually. But He becomes audible, visible, and tangible only for those who have reached the godlike state of the soul. God is love, and only those who have also become large, refined, and strong love can perceive Him like this. And mergence with God for them becomes not just mere words, but their own experience. Those who attained mergence with the Creator become integral parts of Him forever. But when necessary, in order to accomplish their missions on the Earth or on other planets, they can separate a part of themselves without losing unity with Him. Jesus described this using the image of a vine. From the soil, that is from the consciousness of universal God the Father, comes the trunk, the consciousness of a divine teacher, who supports with the hand's branches many embodied souls. In this way, divine teachers manifest themselves for embodied people. At that, they can either have physical bodies, be embodied, or not. Incarnate divine teachers work not only where their physical bodies are present, they can be with parts of themselves consciousness in any place on our planet and work there. They, as consciousnesses, are incomparably greater than our planet. They place only very small parts of themselves in their bodies. Let me dwell on it some more to clarify the difference between pagan deities and personal manifestations of God the Father. Confusion regarding this issue is primarily due to the fact that almost all religious people do not know about the multidimensionality of space. The criterion here is the following: only that one is a part of the Creator who lives in the state of mergence with Him in the highest primordial eon, which is one for the whole boundless universe. As for pagan deities, they are either fictitious folklore characters or real spirits of a certain, but not the highest, level of evolutionary advancement. God, in the aspects of the Creator, the highest teacher, and the ultimate goal for all of us, is one, though he consists of a multitude of perfect consciousnesses merged together. What they have in common is that all of them live in the abode of the subtlest consciousness and act on various islets of the creation by coming out from this abode. It is clear now, is it not? All that we have to do is to get into there and to establish ourselves there in mergence with the Creator. The most fundamental landmark in the beginning of this path is realization of the functions of the spiritual heart, the energy of the Anahata chakra, or the middle dantian. This energy structure of the human organism is the organ responsible for generation of the emotions of love. Very few people have a developed spiritual heart from birth, i.e., from the previous incarnation. Some women can easily succeed in developing the functions of this organ in a harmonious marriage, since the female organism, with its typical hormones and erogenous mammary glands directly connected to Anahata, and which also provides an opportunity to perfect one's love by taking care of children, gives the souls, embodied into female bodies, a matchless advantage over the stronger, in coarseness and violence, sex. For the rest of people, the use of special psychic techniques, which have been developed by spiritual schools of Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and other religious traditions, remains the only possibility to change themselves dramatically. God is love. He asserts this himself. Everyone who has really cognized God can also confirm this. And in order to become godlike, we have to become love in the literal sense of this word. One begins to accomplish this with accustoming oneself to living permanently with the concentration of the consciousness in the Anahata chakra. That brings the energy of the consciousness to the state of emotional love. After that, with the help of meditative training, one gradually expands in this state to become significantly larger than the body and then to encompass the whole earth with the spiritual heart, and later to embrace God with oneself turned into love. In this way, we can become universal spiritual hearts and infuse ourselves into the ocean of the universal Creator. But in order to realize this simple scheme, one has to perform an enormous amount of work. The problem is that God does not let in himself the unworthy. Now let us talk about realization of this scheme, gradually, from the very beginning, so that the unworthy may become worthy of complete spiritual self-realization, even in the current incarnation. One has to begin spiritual work with studying and accepting the concept of the path. Then follows initial ethic self-transformation, and only then one enters on the spiritual path and starts walking it. The word spirituality originates from the expression of Jesus Christ, God is spirit. That is, spirituality stands for association with or likeness to God's Spirit, and the spiritual path is the path of gradual transformation of oneself into Him. This transformation is realized through growth and qualitative change of the spiritual heart first of all, In other words, the spiritual growth is one's growth as a spiritual heart. I have described already how one can become a spiritual heart and transmute oneself further. Now, I want to note that the criterion of the first success is the ability to look at the outer world from within the chest with the eyes of the soul, not in a figurative, but in the very literal sense. When we begin to experience ourselves not as bodies, but as free consciousnesses, then we begin to see with the eyesight of the soul. It is with this eyesight that unembodied spirits see, and with this eyesight God sees what happens to us in His creation. One can say also that the Creator is the heart of God, God in the aspect of the Absolute. This is why one can know Him and merge with Him only after having become a perfect spiritual heart. In one of the greatest spiritual scriptures, the Bhagavad Gita, there is an omission that resulted in a multitude of errors of people who tried in vain to attain perfection without love, not through love. Namely, in a talk with Arjuna, Krishna, pointing to his chest, said that between these eyebrows one has to open an exit of the atmic energy. It was a joke. He pointed to the hair on his male chest. But his gesture was not mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and the joke was not understood by the readers, and later many people were trying to open the third eye, the eye of the soul, not from the spiritual heart, but from the one of the most coarse chakras, ajna. But the results were always sad. Dramatic coarsening of the consciousness, and sometimes stresses and health disorders. In some cases, people acquired the ability to see the colors corresponding to various emotional states of other people, but it had no value for the spiritual path. It only strengthened this vicious tradition. That is, one has to open the third eye, trikuta, not on the forehead, but in the center of the chest. If you do not believe me now, you may ask Krishna, as I did. But first you have to get close to his state, and, having become a developed spiritual heart, learn to see him as a divine consciousness. Otherwise, you will hear anything from a demon who calls himself as Krishna.